Hi, it's Mike Stevenson here. So today we're going to do a quick video on business activity monitoring with Serverless360 for Azure integration services. So we're going to have a look at scenario number 10, which is about debatching. So let's have a quick jump into the demo for this one. So if you imagine we've got two logic apps. So if we have a quick look at our resource group here. So we've got two logic apps, one is for the batch and one is for the batch item, and we're going to have that represented by two transactions within a business process in Serverless360. So we've got a transaction for the batch which starts when we receive the batch. We're then going to execute debatching, and then when the batch is complete we'll have a stage. So they're the major milestones on that transaction, and then for each item in the batch we're going to have batch item transaction, which is going to have a couple of stages in it where we process the individual things. So imagine, let's say we received a collection of orders, so the batch contains 10 orders. We're going to iterate through and we're going to execute a child logic app for each of the individual orders, and we'll separate those into two separate transactions. So if we have a look at how we implement this, so here I've got my batch logic app, so this is the parent one. So I'm going to receive a JSON object which is going to have a batch ID and a collection of items. We're going to do a start transaction, which will be the batch transaction, and we're going to use the batch ID as this header, which we can indicate for a batch. We're then going to do a checkpoint. Now if you notice the status of the checkpoint's in progress, so that'll indicate in the operator console, it'll show that shape's in sort of like an orange color to show that it's in flight. We're then going to iterate over the collection of items. We're going to call a child logic app, pass in the batch ID, pass in the item ID, and we'll pass some correlation token just to link it all together if we want to. When we're done, we're going to update the checkpoint to tell it the batch is complete, so we'll use that debatching stage, indicate it's successful, and then the batch will be complete, and that'll be the final checkpoint. So we're just passing that transaction instance ID across the batch transaction. The child logic app, so this one here called batch item, much simpler logic app, doesn't really have the loop in it or anything like that. So all we're going to do is receive a message. We're going to do a start transaction, but this time it'll be the batch item transaction, so they're both part of the same business process, and we're going to use the batch ID so we can easily see which ones belong to which batch, and then we're going to just do a checkpoint at the end, and we're going to just show the item and stuff like that. So what we're going to do next, if we have a quick look, I've got my operator console for BAM ready over here on the Composite app, and I'm going to just bring in Postman for a second, and I'm going to show you the message I'm going to pass in. So I've got this message here. So I'm just correcting that because I realised I had my JSON wrong. So I'm going to pass in the batch ID of Mike something or other. Got 10 items in my batch, so we'll go and kick that off now. And while that's running, what we'll see is that we'll start getting some BAM events beginning to appear in a second. And our BAM events are all appearing there, and we'll see they'll slowly start completing as the events get processed, and we can see that each one gets ticked off. So they're all finished processing now. So what we can see here is we've got on the bottom, we've got our batch transaction. You can see this column here has the batch ID, so we could easily search for all the ones that belong to the same batch, and we can see that executed through fine. We can pick the individual items within the batch, so they've used this item ID property, and we can see that each one successfully processed. If we'd set any headers or anything, we can see all the details here on them, and that really shows us how we can start seeing batches and batch items get processed, and we can easily manage that if we've got sort of like we're receiving batches of records. Now what I'll do is I'll go and just send another batch in. So I'm just triggering that on my other screen here, and we'll start seeing a new batch ID appear in here. So we can see that the debatching stuff's in progress. This is all getting ticked off now as being done. So you can see we've now processed 2 batches, and we can do things like search for the batch ID if we wanted. So let's say we had, so how many nines is that? 6 nines. So I could search for the batch ID and I could find all the records that belong to that one given batch. I could maybe do an extended query and search for batch ID item 6. So this is a support operator. This gives me a really easy way to start managing the individual transactions within a batch and working out which ones, if any, had problems and troubleshooting that. And I can kind of start seeing some of this, and then I can, if I need to, I can then start going into the Logic apps if I need to go a deeper level of troubleshooting. But it might be the case that I can work out that there's some problem by troubleshooting what happened with the properties here. There are in Serverless360 BAM, there's retry capability, so I might be able to fix a problem and get it running without even having to touch the Logic apps at all. But this is really like your top level sort of process, sort of operations and management of your batching scenario here, to make that, just supporting that solution that little bit easier.